And if you feel like no matter what you do, you're going to have weight and food body struggles for the rest of your life, then I really want to invite you to just ask yourself the simple question: which thoughts and emotions do I spend the most time in? Am I in protection mode or am I in safety mode? Are you ready to bring your dream body and health into life, but just can't seem to keep the motivation going? And is it finally time to address the self-sabotage and the unwanted eating behaviors such as binge eating, emotional eating, and nighttime eating that you know are getting in the way of your goals? Do you ever wonder what it would take for you to feel in control of your rituals so that you can stay consistent and see results? Welcome to this week's special Make Peace with Food Minisode on the Fall in Love with Fitness podcast, where you'll learn how to overcome unwanted eating behavior and other self-sabotaging habits by shifting your nervous system so that your body works with you instead of against you. I'm your host, Sherry Shaban, and with each episode, I am honored to be your coach and guide in the journey to make peace with food and find food and body freedom so that struggle with weight is a thing of the past. When you tune in every Thursday on the Fall in Love with Fitness podcast, you'll catch the latest conversation on unwanted eating behaviors and learn how to shift the nervous system, rewire the brain to new patterns, and end the food and body obsession so you finally feel relaxed and no longer confused around food. Now, before we begin, I want to quickly invite you to grab a free copy of my Food Freedom ebook that I have for you at makepeacewithfood.com. And if you find that this conversation resonates with you today, then I also want to invite you to join our free Make Peace with Food Facebook community at myfoodfreedomlifestyle.com, where you can connect with me and my team directly. The links are in the show notes. And of course, if you know somebody who you feel could benefit from these conversations and discussions, make sure to share this podcast with them too. All right, so we're just about to jump into it, but before we do that, I have a super quick announcement. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while and you're ready to take a time out and focus on just you for a whole week, then I want to personally invite you to join me for the Transformation in Paradise Empyrean Retreat in Costa Rica, May 24 to 31, 2025. This is going to be the most transformative week of your life at the breathtaking Osa Peninsula in Costa Rica. Now, this will be a small group experience with exclusive access at the Blue Osa Resort. Imagine waking to the sound of the Costa Rican rainforest musical every morning, starting your day with a yoga practice overlooking the Pacific Ocean, joined in with howler monkeys, daily walks on a private beach that goes on for miles, macaws flying overhead, spa treatment at a 5-star resort, and the best farm-to-table food ever right from the Blue Osa farm. This retreat is designed to reset your nervous system so you stop the patterns of self-sabotage and overwhelm. You reignite your motivation, you release any addictive habits, and open yourself to the health, relationships, and financial abundance you deserve. Intrigued? Curious? Let's book a call to find out if this retreat is the right fit for you. All you have to do is head on over to sherryshaban.com/retreats and you can book a time with me there. Plus, if you rate and review this podcast, giving me a 5-star rating on iTunes, and then send the screenshot to Sherry at sherryshaban.com so that I know who you are, you'll receive the voucher to join me as early bird discount and get $400 off of Empyrean. So remember, this group is small and the spots are limited. Let's book a call to see if it's right for you. All right, now let's get into it. The part of the nervous system that we are talking about today is the autonomic nervous system. This is the part of the nervous system that is responsible for all the things that we don't have to think about. That is swallowing and digestion and heart rate and blood pressure and heartbeat and all of these things. Even just right now, sitting together, the urine collecting in our bladder is the function of the autonomic nervous system. Now, this part of the nervous system is divided into two components. It's either switch on to what we call parasympathetic, which is rest and digest state, which is our natural state. This is where we should be spending most of our time in. This is also what I refer to as safety mode. And then we have the sympathetic nervous state, which is known as fight or flight. And you may have heard of this before. This is in response to any stimulus in the environment where we suddenly have to protect ourselves. We suddenly have to ensure our survival. And I call this protection mode. So you're going to hear us constantly talking about protection mode and safety mode. Now, these are really, really important because, like I shared, safety mode is our natural state. We're meant to be in this the majority of the time because that's where healing takes place. That's where digestion takes place. That's where we can also be creative. If we want to create something, if we want to create art or music or a new project or cooking or anything like that, that's actually the state that we need to tap into if we're going to want to do that. And creativity is also actual creation of life. That's the state that we have to be in also when we're creating life. And you may have heard someone trying to get pregnant, and it was a very, very stressful situation, even though they went through many, many rounds of in vitro and other methods to try to get pregnant. It never worked for them. But the moment they stopped working on it, all of a sudden, they became pregnant. Well, exactly, because when you're not in safety mode, the body's not ready to start to grow a life. It feels unsafe. And you'll also notice animals in the wild, they don't just start to mate until they find a very safe environment. And safety mode is also really important because that's where the body releases stored energy. Now, stored energy in the body is stored as body fat. So if we're in safety mode, the body's feeling safe, it doesn't need to hold on to body fat, and it's going to release it. And so we're going to talk about this in just a moment because this is really, really important. This is an important concept to really expand on. Now, protection mode, on the other hand, that's a sympathetic nervous state, that's fight or flight or freeze response. That is supposed to be temporary. We're supposed to be in and out and back into safety mode. But that's not what happens. That's not what happens these days. And especially in our society where we're always stressed, we're always overwhelmed, we're always overworked, we're always pushed to our limits. And in fact, we're congratulated for it. You notice that when you do one great thing or one big project, you're moving on to the next. And all of a sudden it's everything with the kids. And all of a sudden it's everything with the parents who are aging, and then taking care of the house, and then the mortgage payments, and then financial issues, and then relationship issues. And so boom, 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 boom. We're constantly bombarded by all of these stressful things in our lives. Whereas maybe in the past, our ancestors had to deal with a saber-toothed tiger. And then as soon as that was over, they could come back to safety mode. In our modern society, that's not what's happening. What's happening is we're always being triggered. We're always being stimulated by extremely stressful things. And now add on one more layer of stress, which is trauma. We don't oftentimes think about this, but trauma is another layer of stress. And especially if we have unresolved trauma, if we've had a very challenging childhood, if we had a lot of issues in our childhood where we weren't able to resolve them, where we had to learn how to cope with it in other ways, or if we've had trauma in our adult life, whether that was something that happened to somebody that we loved or something that happened to us, and we didn't deal with it, we didn't actually allow ourselves to process it, that trauma gets trapped and it triggers us into protection mode. And protection mode, I know it's starting to sound like it's not such a great thing, but it is a great thing. And it only becomes detrimental to our health when we're in the state for a long time. Like I said, we're supposed to be in and out and in and out, but most of us are locked in this place. And so when we're in this place, the reason why it can be a very serving thing is because it helps us ensure our survival. And it really is a way that the body can respond to any danger or threat or feeling unsafe in the environment in a way that will ensure our survival. And the way that the body does that, and the way it only knows how to do that, is by, first of all, slowing down the metabolism, conserving energy. Slowing down the metabolism is a way for our body to conserve energy. If I have fat stores, then I can live longer without food. And so that means I'm going to move less. I'm going to feel more tired. I'm going to feel more lethargic. I'm going to have a lot of sugar cravings also, because the other thing that happens when we're in protection mode is the reptilian part of the brain gets turned on. It actually starts to take over. And there is a natural binge response in this part of the brain that actually drives us to want to eat more. We're going to talk about hormones tomorrow, so I'll be expanding on that a little bit more. But notice how when you're stressed, you want to eat something, or you suddenly have these intense cravings for sweets or sugars or other processed foods. Well, that is a very primitive response. It's actually a response from the body to keep you alive, to ensure your survival. And so you can now start to see how protection mode, or being in this protection mode state for a prolonged period of time, is actually very detrimental to our health. And starting now also to make sense how it is behind cravings. It is behind that stubborn weight loss. But just wait, because it continues to get better and better as we continue to unfold exactly what these nervous system states are. So how do we lock into protection mode? Again, remember, protection mode is something that we should be in and out for a short period of time, but we actually can get locked into it when the stimulus is chronic, when it continues to go on for weeks and months and weeks and months, and then continues to layer on. So it's one thing after the other, one thing after the other, even though it started in childhood. So I work with a lot of women who have endured major traumas in their childhood, and they're still continue to be locked into protection mode. And even though it's been 20 or 30 years, we can actually get unlocked. We can actually shift into safety mode simply by understanding how to manipulate the nervous system. But we essentially get locked into protection mode anytime that we feel unsafe. And safety is a very interesting word, because we oftentimes think safe is, oh, I have shelter and no one's attacking me, so I'm safe. However, you can feel very unsafe if you are in an abusive relationship, or maybe even in a relationship with someone who's narcissistic or who's constantly putting you down. You can feel unsafe when there's a lot of stress around you. Maybe it's even a work environment where there's a lot of pressure to perform and you're always feeling not good enough and you're always feeling like you're failing. Or you can also feel unsafe when you have a lot of negative self-talk yourself, when you're actually putting yourself down constantly, when you're body shaming all the time, when you're always feeling super stressed about diet or super stressed about your weight or your looks or your size. That's also an environment where you feel unsafe. And the other way that we can lock into protection mode is, as I mentioned before, any trauma that you've endured. And trauma can be emotional, it can be physical, it can be psychological. So it could also be sexual. And emotional trauma is that trauma that triggered a massive emotion in you that you were never able to resolve. And as a result of that, you created a dysregulated emotion. The physical trauma is when anyone entered that physical body, that space, either through violence or through maybe misconduct or through a way where it was not with permission. And psychological is now our environment. So that is the things that are being said to us, either again, as children or even as adults. All of that is seen as trauma. Now, a trauma that we don't actually see or consider to be trauma is food scarcity. And food scarcity can either be real or imposed. Real food scarcity is literally growing up without food. So going to bed hungry because there was nothing to eat. That is a form of trauma, and that's a real food scarcity. Imposed food scarcity is what I call dieting, when we actually force ourselves to starve, essentially, either by overly restricting our calories or removing an entire food group that we really, really want. So anytime there's a scarcity, which is I want it, but I can't have it, that we create and that we repeat over and over and over and over again, we create that traumatic feeling of unsafety from not having food. And finally, dysregulated emotions, any emotion that you cannot regulate, that you cannot manage, that you cannot sit in, that you have to turn to a coping mechanism for, is a dysregulated emotion. I feel stressed, I have to smoke a cigarette. I feel stressed, I have to buy something. I feel stressed, I have to eat something. I feel stressed, I have to drink alcohol. Those are all signs of dysregulated emotion. As soon as you feel this emotion that's in a low vibration, that doesn't sit well in the body, you have to somehow avoid it by using a coping mechanism. And again, that locks you into protection mode because you don't actually get rid of that emotion. You just learn how to trap it really well. And you continue to have your nervous system believe that it's an unsafe emotion. Feeling fear or stress is not safe. Feeling sad is not safe. And so I trigger protection mode if this is a dysregulated emotion for me, and I will lean towards a coping mechanism. Now, I want to talk about nighttime snacking a little bit because I think it's really relevant here. Think of how you feel when it's the end of the night. Maybe you put the kids to bed. Maybe it's been a long day at work and you're sitting in front of the TV and you've got all your favorite snack foods and you're about to turn on Netflix. That's a very safe feeling, isn't it? You feel very safe. It's like you're in your cocoon. Maybe you got your blanket. You got your favorite show. Maybe you're alone. Maybe you're even doing this alone where nobody can watch you and judge you. Yeah, I know you resonate with this because this is something that I see very, very common with a lot of people, this moving towards this feeling of safety at the end of the night. The reason why you midnight snack, the reason why you can't stop midnight snacking is because it provides safety for you. And food on a very primitive level for us is safety because on a very unconscious level, without food, we perish, we die without food. And so if you have this habit, then instead of trying to use discipline to stop it, what I would actually suggest that you do is get curious around, why do you feel unsafe? Why does that whole act of midnight snacking give you that feeling of safety? What is it really trying to fulfill? What is the need there that it's trying to fulfill? So we spoke a little bit about emotions. We spoke about safety. And really, emotions are energy that are in motion. So emotion is an energy that's in motion. And energy is really a thought. And this energy that's in motion is actually felt in the body. So anytime we think a thought, we create the energy of that thought, and then the body experiences it. So if I think of a happy thought, my body will experience a happy thought. If I think of a scary thought, my body will experience a scary thought. Right? It's like watching a scary movie and you know it's not real and you know it's all Hollywood, but you're watching it and then your mind is putting in all these thoughts and all of a sudden you realize you're sweating and you're clenching your jaws and your hands and you're really experiencing it. And so imagine this is exactly what happens when we have a sexual thought. We have a thought, that's energy, the body experiences it. And so when anytime we have a negative thought, especially about ourselves, our body experiences it. When we feel like we're not enough, when we feel like we are going to fail, when we feel lots of fear around the world or politics or elections or what's happening to the environment, all of these thoughts create the emotion, create the energy that is being experienced by the body. Because the way that it works is it all has to start with a trigger. And triggers come from our five senses. So I see something, or I smell something, or I taste something, or I feel, or I touch something, or I hear something. Then all of a sudden I will have a thought, because without those five senses, I can't generate a thought. And so this is what we call a trigger. A trigger comes in from the five senses. It gives me a thought. And that's the first form of the energy. Thought is energy. And then all of a sudden, my body starts to experience that. So depending on what the thought is, my body's going to match it. Like I shared, if it's a fearful thought, my body's going to react in fight or flight. It's going to react in protection mode. If it is a thought of gratitude, my body's going to react in a different way. And so after the emotion is experienced, generally we take an action based on that emotion. And the action that's repeated over and over and over and over again becomes a habit. It becomes a learned pattern subconsciously in the mind. And it eventually becomes a behavior that we have. And the behaviors that we have collectively create our character. And so you see how we can have a thought, oh, so-and-so just broke up with me. I guess I'm not pretty enough. And all of a sudden my body starts to feel really unsafe. I start to feel not enough. I start to feel a lot of fear, or I start to feel a lot of sadness. Then I'm going to take action around that. Maybe I'm going to go to the fridge and get some ice cream. And then every single time I feel rejection, I'm going to get ice cream. I feel rejection. I'm going to get ice cream. I feel rejection. I'm going to get ice cream. All of a sudden, that's just my behavior. Anytime I feel sad, I lean to ice cream. I feel rejected, I lean to ice cream. And the more that I do that, well, my character essentially is developed, because I feel stressed and now I go out and grab something to eat. And then I feel another emotion and maybe sadness. And then maybe I will overshop and overspend. And then I'll feel another emotion. And then I will start to find another coping mechanism. And all of these are habits that are created in the mind. And we put them on repeat. We put them on repeat. Every single time we link these things together, we fortify it by repeating it. And then eventually, cumulatively, it becomes our character, becomes who we are. And so I hope this is starting to resonate with you, because again, if you're listening to this and the goal is to release weight, this is why diets fail. Because all you're doing is trying to limit yourself from the number of calories, and you're trying to exercise more. And really, the issue is, why am I overeating? What's leading me to overeating? What's leading me to sabotaging at night? I do really, really great during the day. And then all of a sudden at night, why am I eating all the chips and the ice cream and the cookies? And why am I driving to the grocery store to go get junk food? That is what we want to get curious around. Because if you understand that, again, it's coming from what I'm talking about here, coming from the nervous system, then you're not going to be focusing on the food. Because if you continue to focus on the food and you continue to focus on the dieting part of it and the calories and exercising to really help you overcome this whole thing that I'm talking about, then it's almost like you continue to mop the floor when really the issue is you have a leaky faucet. I mean, that makes no sense. Why would you just keep mopping the floor to try to fix the leaky faucet? You wouldn't do that, would you? No, you'd go fix the faucet. Then you wouldn't have to mop the floor. And so that's the idea. This is what we help people do in the Make Peace with Food program and in the community. And so let's expand on this and what I just shared a little bit, because here's the binge loop, okay? I'm going to use the word binge, but I don't want you to get hung over the labels. It's really not about finding the right label that fits your description or anything like that. It's really understanding that binging can happen either if you sit in one sitting and eat an entire cake, or eat an entire cake throughout the entire day. It's still binge eating. And we've learned binge eating back in high school, maybe when we were learning about binge and purge. And so many of us have this picture in our mind that binging means I'm going to eat an insane amount of calories at one time. And that's not what it is. Binging really is out of control. It is out of integrity. It is doing something even though you know it doesn't serve you. You know you're sabotaging. So I actually want you to use the word sabotage, the sabotage loop versus the binge loop, if that feels like it resonates a little bit more with you. And like I shared, this happens in the reptilian brain. And I just went through exactly how it's felt in the body, how the emotion is felt in the body. But essentially, thought, remember, creates energy. So anytime we have a thought, then a neurotransmitter is released in the brain. And the neurotransmitter then creates a neuropeptide. And the neuropeptide is what's actually felt or caused for that feeling in the body. And that neuropeptide then travels to a gland, and the gland secretes a hormone, and the hormone is what starts to create physical changes in the body. So let me unpack that a little bit, because this concept can sometimes be challenging to understand. All I want you to know is that every single thought that we have creates chemistry in the body. And every single thought has a certain frequency. Remember, it's energy. And that frequency is going to match a gland. It's going to create a particular neurotransmitter that is going to be aligned or matching with that frequency. And then it's going to create a neuropeptide that matches that frequency. And then it's going to find the receptor site on the gland that matches that frequency. And so if you have a sexual thought, the neurotransmitter is going to match that frequency. It's going to give rise to a neuropeptide. It's going to start to change certain sensations of the body. It's going to travel to a very specific gland in the body. I know you know where I'm going with this. And certain physical changes are going to happen because hormones will be released there. Now, the same thing is true when you have a thought that's stressful or scary or gives you the feelings of anxiety. Oh my God, I'm not good enough. I'm going to fail. I'm going to get rejected. Any of those thoughts creates a neurotransmitter for it, creates a neuropeptide. Now the body starts to feel unsafe, and the body starts to feel the effects of it, sweating and shaking and a lot of fear and shortness of breath. And then the more that we continue to secrete these hormones, the more it gives rise to more of those thoughts. So like I said, you're on this loop. The thoughts, the brain release a neurotransmitter, the neurotransmitter releases a neuropeptide releases hormones, which releases more neurotransmitters, which release more neuropeptides, which release more hormones, and so on and so forth. And so instead, again, of using discipline to stop this, we're going to learn how to interrupt this loop. And so that's why the key to ending compulsive overeating and abolishing the cravings and stopping the self-sabotage is by shifting the nervous system. There is no other way. And I've been in this space for 25 years. I see people all the time still decide, you know what, I'm going to go on that diet. My friend just took Ozempic. My friend just tried this thing. I'm going to go on it. And I'll tell you, I work with many people who've done gastric bypasses, who've taken the Ozempic and other semaglutides, who've tried other weight loss extreme methods, and they still come back to the starting point. Why? Because their nervous system is locked into protection mode. And the only way out is to shift into safety mode. And so let's face it, because I know you're here, and if you're still listening in today, it's because on some level, you know all this. You know that it's not dieting. And you know that all the things that you've tried in the past haven't worked, and that all you're doing is looking for another method to try. And you know also that they say that repeating the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, is called insanity. And so it doesn't matter really how organic your food is, or how calculated your macros are, or how many hours of cardio you do each week, because the pattern is going to be stuck and it's going to be on repeat. This is what's going through your mind. And we teach you this in the course, and we show you exactly how to interrupt it. There is a prompting event. So generally, there's something that triggers that emotion in you. It's a dysregulated emotion, as we shared earlier. This is an emotion that you have a hard time sitting in. It could be anger, it could be sadness, it could be anxiety, it could be boredom, it could even be joy. And the only way that you've learned how to deal with this emotion is to avoid it. And so you turn to some sort of coping mechanism. Eating out of control, or eating foods that don't serve you or that you promised you weren't going to have, is one of the ways that we do that. Sure, it gives you a temporary relief, but then what happens later? Yeah, you feel guilty, you feel frustrated, you feel angry at yourself, which again brings up another emotion. But since you've already destroyed half the box of cookies and practically the entire pint of ice cream, you may as well just keep going, because tomorrow you'll be good. You'll never do this again. Tonight will be the last time you ever binge eat, and you know that you're going to stop it. And so what happens? Again, you escape that secondary dysregulated emotion, and you again lean towards that coping mechanism. And so the only way to stop this, again, is not by swearing off the ice cream. Don't you want to just be able to have one scoop like everyone else? Don't you just want to be able to have a couple of cookies and chill and relax and walk away and not thinking about it anymore? Don't you want to not feel guilty because you had something that had sugar in it? Don't you want to get into that space where you could just have one and that's it? Yeah, that's exactly where we can go. It is possible. Even if you've been binge eating or emotional eating or stress eating for years, you can do that. If you understand how to manage these dysregulated emotions and how to release any of these traumatic events or dysregulated emotions, or the other prompting events that I shared with you earlier that lead to getting trapped into protection mode. And so that's why we say when the sabotage stops, the transformation begins. It's not the other way around. Diet culture tells us that if we want to be healthy, we have to release weight. And that is not true at all. If we want to release weight, we first have to be healthy. And if we're going to be healthy, that means we have to address the nervous system. We have to remember that our physical body is an outward reflection of our internal environment. If we understand that if I want to change my physical body, I got to change what's going on inside, because these don't match. And so this is what we can support you in doing. And I'm going to share with you these photos, and I'm not a big, pusher of before and after photos, but here's what's really cool about them. why I'm so proud of sharing these photos with you is because none of these people that I'm sharing these photos of have actually gotten to where they got or got their results because they were dieting and exercising. Sure, many moons ago, I used to hold all kinds of fitness challenges in my gym and I give people meal plans. But what's really cool about this is all of these people got to this place simply because they stopped self-sabotaging. I mean, think of what would happen if you stopped nighttime snacking. Like, think of the impact that stopping that one habit would have on your entire lifestyle, even on your bank account. I mean, think about that. And so I also share with you a couple of these transformational stories because, for example, this first one, SR, that I'm sharing with you, what's really cool about this one is that right now she's in her 50s. She's well in her 50s. I took this photo many years ago. And we have this misconception that we feel like it's too late once we reach a certain age, or after menopause and it's never possible, or it's just normal that as women age and after they have kids that they can never reverse things, and blah blah, and all these things that we hear from diet cultures or we hear from people around us. And so why I love sharing this with you is because no, it's not true. This is what she initially believed when she started working with us, but actually we work with many women in their 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s who get results. It's really never too late. And we have to remove that belief from our mind. That's called a limiting belief. And the other little photo here that I'm sharing with you, why I love this one too, is because she struggled with weight her entire life. She was told that this is just something that runs in the family and you'll never release weight. She was made fun of her weight all the time as a kid. And she had just learned to accept herself, thinking that it was hereditary, thinking that she was just going to be like that for the rest of her life. And again, we really got into what was going on in the childhood and the childhood traumas that was actually keeping her stuck. And so this is why this work is really important and very meaningful to me, because we all have something that stands in our way. And unfortunately, we have these limiting beliefs that we are holding on to that actually prevent us from growing and moving forward. And if you're open and if you're curious, you really can. But you have to stop focusing on the weight. You have to stop focusing on the food. And so as I wrap this up today, if any of this sounds like you, if your first diet was in grade school and it's been a cycle of struggle with weight and body image ever since, if you can be disciplined, then all of a sudden you hit a point of stress, you lose control and go off the deep end, and you're looking for answers to why you are where you are. If you dread clothes shopping or secretly hide behind others in photos so that you won't have to be as visible. If you spend at least 50% of your time thinking about what you're going to eat, what you're not going to eat, how much of it you're going to have, and you're tired of having to plan everything out or even having to think about food anymore, and you just want to be able to eat normally like everyone else. If you've been a Weight Watchers lifetime member 3 times, spent thousands on tracking foods, meal plans, supplements, nutritionists, shopping at Sprouts, Whole Foods, or Costco, and have undone everything you've done and all that investment that you've made. If you sometimes lie in bed at night with a lot of anxiety about your weight, trying to figure out how you're going to keep your eating on track, or because you're feeling guilt or shame after a big binge. If you worry that you keep gaining weight, that you could eventually become a burden to someone that you love, maybe a close family member. And if you feel like no matter what you do, you're going to have weight and food body struggles for the rest of your life, then I really want to invite you to just ask yourself this simple question. Which thoughts and emotions do I spend the most time in? Am I in protection mode or am I in safety mode? Are they reflective of protection mode or are they reflective of safety mode? Thank you for listening to this week's Make Peace with Food Minisode on the Fall in Love with Fitness podcast. If this has resonated with you today, I want to invite you to subscribe to the show so you never miss a beat. And if you know someone who could benefit from this conversation, then please share this episode with them. Let's work together to help as many people as possible make peace with food and fall in love with fitness. And by the way, I need to mention that if you rate and review this podcast on iTunes and send over the screenshot to Sherry@sherryshaban.com, you'll receive a $500 voucher to join me at one of my upcoming retreats or to use it in our Make Peace with Food coaching program. And don't forget to visit myfoodfreedomlifestyle.com to join the free Facebook group for more resources. And remember, athlete, you are an inspiration. I cannot wait to hear your story.